injured in an accident. Clelia Dracino insists on not succumbing to pain or the doubts of others under Amelia's treatment. She has a frank conversation with Prince Camden, during which Camden not only apologizes for his previous offensive actions, but also acknowledges Kalai's professional skills and deep understanding of Dragon, showing Kalai's tenacity in the face of gender bias and professional challenges. Chapter 8. When I woke up, I found the flask Giles had given me last night on my nightstand, filled to the brim with his concoction. I didn't have the need for it this morning, though. I was a little achy, but the wounds had closed during the night. Still, the gesture warmed my heart. Smiling, I peeled the bandages off and changed into riding pants and a baggy cotton shirt. Instead of letting it remain baggy at my sides, so I found some pins and tightened the fabric so it revealed the curves I had been unintentionally hiding. Aunt Patricia would enjoy tailoring my wardrobe to flatter me more, I'm sure. I skipped down the stairs, taking Cowden's wonderful cooking into my nose. Man, the woman he married was going to be very lucky. I hope they expect us to visit for dinner a lot. My brother's dad and Prince Camden were around the table mowing on some bacon and bread. I demanded of him as I joined them and stashed some food on my plate before it all disappeared into their belly. He pounded his chest, then swallowed with a sip of water right behind it. You grown. I looked down at my breasts, of which he must be referring to, since my tight shirt was all that was different on me. Harry's face went pink. What did Amelia do to you last night? Prince Camden snorted. You can't seriously mean you've never noticed your sister's breasts growing in. She always wears baggy shirts. Cotton defended. He narrowed his scrutinizing eyes on us. You've done something to your shirt. But if they were going to react like this to a simple change, I didn't think anyone would notice. Maybe I should take the pins out. You look nice today, Kalai, Dad said with a soft smile. Ignore these idiots. Talon snorted with an eye roll. Yeah. She looks nice for the prince. My face flamed, and I did everything in my power to not look at the snickering prince and focus my rage on my evil brother. I just wanted to do something different today. Screw breakfast. If this was how I was going to be treated in front of Prince Camden, no less. Prince, we're just gonna give me a draw look, not moving an in. I'm going to finish my breakfast. Thank you, I'm the guide. And I say we're leaving. The sooner we started his training, the sooner he could leave, and I could no longer be embarrassed by my brother. And I'm your prince, and I say I'll do what I want. You can't order me around, woman. My brothers snickered, taking sneak peeks at each other in anticipation. This was it. Who was going to win the bet? However, I had no compulsion to cry, and I didn't feel like reaming the prince out at this early hour. I wanted to slap him. My hand burned and told me to do it. The only thing holding me back was Dad's look of warning, because he knew I wanted to hurt the prince. I stole a deep breath and released it. Fine, Your Highness, I'll be outside when you're ready. Good. He stuck his chin up at me then, continued eating, like I'd been dismissed. Growling the whole way, I marched out the house and slammed the door behind me. Alistair had been waiting eagerly for me to show myself, and when I did turn up, she hopped over to me, wrapped her tail around me, and pressed her muzzle against my chest. My rage died away, and I held her face, scratching the tip of her chin where she couldn't get to properly with the small horns in her Clausen's way. I told you I'd feel better today, didn't I? She sniffed my back for any sign of blood content. She puffed white smoke over my head. What are you doing? Prince Camden ridiculed me on his way out the door. He wore the same riding pants and scale jacket he wore yesterday, no doubt, expecting to ride a dragon today. Not with his attitude this morning. He'd be lucky if a dragon wanted to be near him. I'm greeting Eleazar, I told him, taking the higher road and not continuing to insult him. Eleazar, this is Prince Camden, Prince. This is my best friend. He exchanged a dubious look between us. I thought you were joking when you said your best friend was a dragon. I wasn't, I replied curtly, turning my attention back to my friend. Eleazar, this is the jackass I warned you about. We're stuck with him for the time being, so don't blow smoke up his ass. Very funny. I peered back at him. I wasn't joking. Elazar is very aggressive towards people I don't like. I have to hold her back. Elazar broke from our embrace and leapt in front of him, releasing a dangerous growl from the back of her throat, right in his face. He staggered back and fell in his butt, face pale Elazar. I tapped her, hind leg. Leave him alone. He's going to be a dragon prince. She snorted purposely, letting snot shoot out her nostrils and splattering the ground at his feet, then swung around in a big motion of fluttering wings and wide tail swishes. She sat behind me, curling her tail around my feet protectively. Grumbling, he stood up and dusted himself off. Let me guess, she doesn't like me. His tone was too mocking for me to be happy someone actually believed they could tell what a dragon was thinking by their actions. No, she doesn't. Let's go. I spun on my heel for the village. Where are we going? He demanded, quickly falling into step beside me. He peered up at Elazar warily, making sure it was okay for him to be this close to me. If she didn't stop him by now, he was safe. We're going to the nests, so we can find you a dragon and get you out of here as fast as possible. Lovely, at least we can agree on something. The sooner I get away from you, the better. He brushed a hand through his hair indignantly, shoulder brushing against mine as he did it. Could he walk any closer? Sidestepping him, I patted Elazar's shoulder as we approached the river. Go up ahead. We'll meet you on the other side of the village. She peered at me then to Prince calmed in and flattened her wings against her back while she glared at him. I patted her side again in comfort. Don't worry, I can take it. Rolling his eyes, he grunted and drifted away from me, so there was a good 2 feet between us, with a look that suggested he might catch a deadly disease if he was any closer to me. She leant into me, then jumped into the sky. I was prepared for the gust of wind that followed the powerful thrust of her wings, but he was not, and stumbled back. I caught his elbow and yanked him upright. He brushed my arm off with a short growl. Was that necessary? You get used to it. I told him she didn't mean anything by it. I'm sure he snided, glaring at her as she glided over the village. Well, maybe she did. I held back my remarks and looked around the streets as we walked through them. My eyes particularly caught the loaf of bread Sammy was selling at his bread stall. He wore a dark shirt with a leather vest and light pants. His pale skin was a right contrast to his pitch black hair. However, freckles dusted his nose and cheeks, adding a splash of youth to his features. When we were younger, kids used to make fun of his buck teeth, but he appeared to have embraced them now and gave me a toothy smile. He winked at me, eyes falling to my chest. Morning, Kyle. You look good today. I smiled at him and tossed a coin at him. Thanks. He handed me the biggest warm loaf he had, face lit up like a bonfire as he inclined his head towards me. Prince Camden rolled his eyes on our way down the street. What? You're not going to deck the guy for ogling you. I gave him a sidelong glance and shook my head, disappointed he thought I went around town beating guys up for looking at me too long. There's nothing wrong with him liking the view. It was actually quite flattering Sammy liked what he saw. He, like everyone else, didn't really see me as anything more than a girl with 5 tall-ass brothers and a scary-ass father. I'd take being checked out when I could get it. Was as far as it was ever going to get anyway. Your brothers didn't seem to mind it either. I remarked. His face went red. Please, my brothers have more class than to gawk at a wild thing. Disregarding his comment on me being a wild thing, I waggled my eyebrows at whatever helps you sleep at night. I'm new, exciting. Everyone wants a piece of it. Except everyone's too afraid to admit it, really, because that's not what Amber tells me. My hand clenched around my loaf too much. A piece broke off and landed on my foot. I wouldn't take what Amber says to heart. She has a tendency to stretch the truth. A glimmer flashed across his eyes in the sunlight. They were a striking green this morning, like a leaf held up to the sun. His hair appeared to have tufts of gold in it, too. It wasn't all pale. Of course she does. He replied stiffly. Amber will say whatever she can to get attention. I'm new here, but I'm not People have tried to manipulate me for my money and power all my life. She's nothing I haven't seen before. But you believe the things she says about me? I asked indignantly, glaring at him. Could he possibly get any worse? He watched me a moment, eyes unrelenting and calculating. I haven't decided if I should believe her or not yet. Some of the things she said are, well, believable from what I've seen far. Like what? I might as well figure out what lies she was feeding him and squash them if we were going to spend a lot of time together. He scratched the back of his head and turned his gaze forward just when a couple of kids ran in front of us, chasing each other with sticks. I've remembered a time when that used to be me and my brothers running around town, hunting down whoever was it. Casper was usually the one we chased since he was the oldest and tallest, needing some advantage against the five of us, searching the town for him, then chasing him with our sticks when we found him. The prince frowned. She said you used to beat other kids growing up and lord over them, that you got to share a house with princes, that you were special and they were worthless. Of course, she said that's side too. I only beat kids up in self-defense. They used to gang up on me for being different, so I kicked their asses. I never lorded anything over anyone. I know other Tamers are jealous because your family clearly sees talent in mine. Why would I rub it in their face? I don't get anything off doing that to people. He pressed his lips in a tight line, thinking on it. We walked in silence for a while as he decided on what to think of me. I stopped by the butcher to grab some jerky for the dragons to entice them to say hello to the prince, since I had a feeling he was going to need all the help he could get. I fell in sore the most human-tolerant dragon I knew didn't like him. We had just passed the last of the houses on the other side of town, and were about to meet up with Elazor in the wildflower field when he stopped. Clearly not ready to leave the boundaries of town just yet. The breeze blew his hair to the side, adding curls to the tips of his dusty blonde locks. Some might say the windblown look on him was rather fetching, but the scrutinizing look on his face when he regarded me ruined it for me. Amber said that no man wants to be with you because you turn them down and laugh in their face that you're too good for any man. His tone was harsh, accusatory, and a little vindictive. No doubt remembering what I'd done to his groin when I first met him. He was hoping to get a rise out of me for poking a soft spot. I didn't give him the satisfaction and gazed at him with a blank face. No man wants to be with me because my body is ugly. I'm tougher than most men in this village, and they're all afraid of my father. I wouldn't laugh in a man's face for asking me out, even if I didn't like him, because at least he had the balls to ask. I nodded over to Elazor, who was stretching her wings to their full length. If it weren't for the fact she was moving, her Métis green scales in the sun made her look like an immaculate stone statue. She was always poised elegantly, ready for whatever I had planned for the day. Are you done listening to a lying slut? I asked the prince impatiently. Alistair's waiting. His eyes rolled to the heavens and back. You ladies really don't like each other. What did she ever do to you to deserve this treatment from you? I balked at the audacity. You think I'm the antagonist. Why did it hurt so much that he thought I had started our feud, that she'd actually be nice to me if it weren't for the way I treated her?
Yeah, if you're stupid enough to actually believe a word she told you, then I'm not going to waste my breath on you.
He crossed his arms and put all his weight on one foot, making a point that he wasn't moving. See, maybe if you weren't so aggressive, I wouldn't believe her, but it's not that hard to see where she's coming from at the moment. Maybe if you smiled more instead of sneered, I would think differently. I scoffed aloud. Of course, you'd like that all men wanted women to sit pretty and smile at them. Too bad for them. I was here to spice things up. Yeah, he agreed sharply. Believe it or not, I like to see my people smile and be happy. Oh. Well, no, I looked like an asshole. Clearing my throat, I spun on my heel and headed for Elishergan. Maybe it wouldn't hurt me to smile a little more then, but not for that bitch. Nothing I do will ever make her happy. After a moment, he caught up to me, eyes forward, all businesslike. So if you're not the antagonist, what did you do to make her hate you so much? I don't think she hates me. She just doesn't like me. I don't know if you've noticed, but I'm different from my fellow villagers. She thinks my difference is shameful. So she reminds me every day what a freak of nature I am. He scoffed, shaking his head disappointedly. You're not that different. Sure, your occupation is a little more dangerous than most women's jobs, but you clean up nicely. It was my turn to scoff. Tell that, Amber, except don't.
Don't tell anyone I wore a dress at the castle. Why not? I don't want Dad getting any ideas of shipping me off to my Aunt Patricia to become more womanly.
I love my job, and I wouldn't change it for anything. I came to a stop in front of Eliezer, refusing to look at the print. I told him something I'd never told anyone, and the power to take the life I'd fought for away. I couldn't bear to look at him to see if he was scheming or not. Eliezer lowered herself down so I could hop onto her back. Prince Camden took in her size, doubtfully. She stood straight, tail pointed while she glared at him, not impressed by his judgy eye. I patted her neck in comfort. Sorry, she couldn't roast him like I knew she wanted to.
Can she fly with both of us? Not for long, I told him honestly, which earned me a glare from the dragon for admitting her flaw.
She can get us most of the way there. Otherwise, it'll take a good chunk of the day getting there. Nodding, he climbed up behind me and wrapped his arms tightly around me without hesitation this time. Eliezer jumped into the sky, wings spreading wide to catch a current. She angled for the looming gap between Mount Dora and Mount Asher, where our dragon colony nested. She got us to the top of the hill, panting for breath. Prince Camden hopped off first, shaking his legs out while he looked around cautiously. I didn't blame him for thinking I'd taken him somewhere secluded so my dragon could eat him. The dark Rocky Mountains and seemingly deserted trail did feel ominous. If he listened, he would hear the dragons socializing over the ridge, which only made it more unsettling for someone who wasn't used to being around unfamiliar dragons.
I rubbed my face against Elizarus. Thank you, girl. You can rest here if you want.
Yeah, I'll be okay in there. Nodding, she curled up and faced down the length of the trail, a silent promise to guard the nest exit, as unnecessary as it was. Prince Camden raised his eyebrows at me. Is there any reason we wouldn't be okay in there? He pointed at the crest of the ridge, which was very clearly the nest's entrance. I shrugged. The dragons aren't so welcoming of strangers during breeding and hatching season, but both of those have passed, and all the dragonlings are being trained in the pen right now, where I would be if Dad hadn't asked me to guide the prince. My job was to get the dragonlings used to humans and to the way we did things in Plum while their mothers watched.
Kaiden and Spence were the other two dragonling tamers, the only other two humans the females completely trusted with their young, and that was only after I handpicked them for their gentleness and introduced them to the mothers.
Here, I tossed him the bag of jerky I bought earlier. Dragons love jerky. He peered inside dubiously, then frowned at me. In the shadow of the mountains, his hair was almost white. He looked older, but not in a bad way. The youthfulness and the raw beauty of his features still holding true. Thanks, I nodded, then began the trek up the rest of the hill. He followed close behind, holding the bag tightly at his side. So these dragons we're about to meet, they're tame. I couldn't help overhearing the nerves in his voice. As much as I wanted to tease him for being nervous, meeting unfamiliar dragons could be terrifying. And it was probably even more nerve-wracking when he thought about finding a partner in one of them. He'd waited his whole life for this moment. I would be excited and nervous too. So I let him keep his dignity. How many are there? He added after my confirmation. We have 212 in our colony, I told him levelly, but they won't all be in the nest at once. Depending how today goes, we might have to find them in the mountain. I'll have to teach you how to fly if we do. I came to a stop at the top of the mount and looked down the canyon. There was a good handful of dragons here today, mostly young ones, Elasor's. They were playing, snapping at each other, and whipping their tails in their sides.
Eager to see the look on Prince Camden's face at the sight of their play, I turned to him with a shit-eating grin.
You ready to find your partner wary of my look? He inched up the mound to join me.
His mouth dropped open. Huh? Are you sure we're safe?
He asked as Jeremiah nipped at Preston's side.
You're the safest person in the valley when you're with me, I told him truthfully, though he and many other people doubted it.
The cocky grin on my face probably didn't help instill any confidence he had in me.
I whistled at the dragons. All 50 of them whipped their heads around to look at us.
Preston leapt away from Jeremiah and the other dragons and landed in front of us, kicking up dirt.
The prince would have fallen if I hadn't caught his shirt and yanked him to my side.
I'm going to have to work on that. Dragons weren't exactly elegant.
He was going to have to get used to being bombarded by large gusts of wind and jostled by the shaking ground. I held my hand out to the prince, demanding jerky.
He slapped a piece into my palm with a steady hand. I had to give him credit. The man had ball. If he'd expected the impact of Preston's arrival, he would have held his ground defiantly.
Whether he was scared, shitless on the inside, or a stubborn fool, I would never know. Impressive.
This is how you feed a dragon. I tossed the jerky over Preston's head. The dragon swung his head up and snapped his jaws shut, swallowing the piece. A gentle hum vibrated through his chest, and the dark blue and black dragon lowered his head so I could pet him. His humming grew louder at my rough scratches. I glanced back at the prince. Do you want to feed or pet him? He won't hurt you. He screwed his face up, put off by the very idea of treating a dragon like an ordinary pet.
Amber was right about one thing, you're a crazy dragon lady.
As long as they like it, I'll continue to be crazy, I replied hotly. If the dragons enjoyed my company, what else mattered? I grabbed more jerky from him and double-tapped Preston's jaw. He opened his mouth, drool dripping off his teeth.
I placed the piece on his tongue and double-tapped his face again so he knew my hand was clear. That's how I feed a dragon.
At the sight of more jerky, the other dragons came closer, becoming more aggressive as the gap shrunk. One of the bigger males body-checked a female into the cliff wall and shoved his way to the front.
Joby, he could be a real big bully when given a chance, like right now.
He took hold of Preston's tail between his teeth and pulled him back, away from us. I stepped away from the prince and clapped loudly, yelling to catch Joby's attention. He snarled at me, baring his teeth. Hey, I barked back. Don't give me that sass about it. Back of the line, he snarled again. Heart-pounding, harder than a dragon's wing beat. I stomped my foot and looked him straight in the eye as he challenged. Any sane Tamer so. Yeah, I guess I was a little crazy. Would never give direct eye contact to an aggressive male like this, but they didn't have my trick. If you keep giving me that look, you're not going to get any jerky, you big buffoon.
Only good dragons get treats. He stopped growling and narrowed his slit eyes on me.
Oh, yeah, he understood. There were only two ways to get treats from me. Now he can behave and wait his turn, or he could kill us and take his claim and face the wrath of all the other dragons who I'd bonded with.
I grew up alongside these guys. I've just like any other sibling to them, and he knew that.
Prince Camden laughed incredulously from behind Preston. You've got to be kidding me. They're not dogs. Who cares about a chunk of beef? When you're that big, he'll kill us. Ignoring him, I focused on Joe Beebe. What's it going to be, big guy? The gray dragon puffed black smoke out of his mouth, but he bowed his head and flattened his wings against his back in apology. That's what I thought. I relaxed and released the breath I'd held. The gamble had worked for me this far, but I knew how easy it could be for a dragon to decide he didn't want to obey me. It was all thanks to everything Elisher had taught me that had kept me alive, and I really hoped it would continue to do so. Wiping sweat off my brow, I gestured for Prince Camden to come to my side. The dragons had calmed now and waited patiently for their jerky. He stood beside me, eyeing Joby up like he thought the dragon was going to swallow him whole at any moment. You want to find your partner? Here are 50 dragons have at him. He scrunched his brow at me. How do I do that? What do I do? Introduce yourself. Tell them what you're here for. They'll talk in your mind if they want to be your partner. At least that was what I'd gathered from my brothers. All they'd said was that he'd know. Was I gonna let the prince know I didn't really know what I was doing? No. Definitely not. Since he didn't want to feed the dragons and get to know them, I snatched the bag of jerky from him and dangled it tauntingly in front of them. There were various hisses, croons, and rumbles at the sight of the bag. They all started drooling. Stepping away from Preston's pile of drool with a grimace, the prince cleared his throat and inspected the dragons one by one as we passed them, not bothering with introductions, despite my suggestion. It was like we were on a horse show, not looking for his lifelong partner. Grinding my jaw, keeping my thoughts about him, ignoring my advice to myself, I waggled the jerky, about to get the dragons to open their mouths. His frown deepened, and he grew more frustrated the further down the line we went. Don't you have bigger dragons? My brother's dragons are huge. I am kind of disappointed in it. The size of the dragon wasn't everything. The smaller ones were more nimble and faster. The bigger ones had more brute strength, but not necessarily power if he was after a dragon that would give him strong ability. These guys are only 20 years old or younger. I replied, if you want a bigger one, we can look into finding an older dragon in a mounting. They'll be less likely to bond with you, though. He tore his gaze away from a red female to look at me and crossed his arms. Why? Dragons don't like change. A younger one will be more willing to adapt. However, they're not as set in their ways. Grunting, he turned his attention back to the dragons, sizing them up a little less critically. But I could tell he had an idea of what he wanted from a dragon in his mind, and he wasn't finding it here. Honestly, if I could pick it up from him, any of these dragons could too. None of them want to be partnered with a human who only wanted them for their power or size. It's going to be here forever. I concealed a heavy sigh, playing it up as a yawn. I think we should call it quits for today, Prince, I said, noticing I was all out of jerky. Thankfully, I'd gotten to everyone. Unfortunately, that also meant none of them had picked Prince Camden, and his frown had turned into a nasty scowl. Whatever, I'm not getting anything here. Are you sure there isn't something I have to do? My brothers said finding a dragon was the easy part. Your brothers also had an open mind and didn't see dragons as powerhouses. I shrugged because I knew my casualness would piss him off. It's supposed to be the easiest part.
Yes.
Clearly not for everyone.
Yeah.
He curled his lip up at me. But you know what? I think you're purposely sabotaging me. When we get back, I want to talk to Grant out loud.
You think he's going to slap me on the wrist and tell me to try harder? I'm not the problem.
We'll see. Once Grant tells Talon to guide me, Talon's grounded. He can't do it. Then one of your other brothers, someone who knows what he's doing. Not some worthless dragon fucker. And there it was, what he really thought of me. It hurt more than I would ever show. Why did it hurt more coming out of his mouth than anyone else? Was it because his family had worked with mine for generations peacefully and I'd grown up with his brother? Or maybe it was because I had faith in him, that I could somehow break through his mentality towards dragons, and that I'd find a decent person underneath all that asshole. But I was wrong. There was nothing underneath. Frustrated with him and angry with myself for hoping he was a better man than he let on, I clenched my fists, envisioning all the things I wanted to do to him for making me feel like a fool. Sacking him again, punching his pretty nose until it was crooked and it would never look the same again. Pound his face into the ground, let the dragons hissing at him eat him. However, he was saved from whatever fate I decided for him. A furious roar rented the air. Chapter 9.
I just wanted to take a quick moment to thank everyone who has supported me through this and all my new readers out there.
Sharing my work with others isn't easy, but hearing how much you enjoy it makes it worth it. Thank you. Don't forget to vote and leave a comment. I turned to the direction of the agonized crowd. It wasn't close. It must have come from the village. I recognized the deep tenor of the roar. Zeller. If he was in that much pain, he was going to be trouble. They were going to need me. On pure instinct, I opened my mouth to call for Elser, then I caught sight of Prince Camden looking around for the source of the cry. I wasn't alone, and Elser wouldn't be able to take us there as quickly as I wanted to. I called instead, whirling to the large gray dragon. I need a lift. The dragon was at my side. In an instant, they'd all heard the roar too. They knew it was a dragon in pain. Soft moans echoed throughout the nest in compassion for the dragon.
Wait.
The prince shouted, following me until I climbed up Joby's side and settled between two horns. You're riding bareback. That's crazy. You'll be thrown off. No, you'll be thrown off, I snapped viciously, not forgetting what he had said to me only moments ago. Joby, grab him. I don't have time for spoiled brat. The dragon's wings fluttered, lifting him onto his back legs so he could take a very disgruntled prince into his claws. He shouted at me and the dragon to let him go. We didn't. Joby launched into the sky. I almost lost my grip. He was so powerful. Prince Camden screamed, halting his attempts to fight the dragon's hold. He shot a glare at me instead, ash blonde hair slapping against his face as he did so. I would have been amused if a dragon wasn't hurt. Fuck you, Kalai. This is it. I don't want you as my guy. Tell me something I don't know. I muttered, squeezing my arms around a horn. My feet found holes against the joints of his wings for support. We went over the mountain, then dove down for the village. From up here, I saw Zealer was backed into a corner by the healing pen, where our healers would do checkups or heal the wounds dragons procured from playing or defending themselves in the wild. The pen was a large size butted up against a cliffside some dragons like to perch on while recovering. This afternoon, however, Zeller was against it, thrashing his tail and hissing at Talon, the first tamer on the scene. Joby dropped the prince on the ground before landing beside the dragon healing hut where the healers had gathered to watch. Thankfully, Amber wasn't among them. I wasn't in the mood to see her stupid smug face.
I slid off Job and rushed to my brother's side.
Zeller snarled at my entrance, inducing a scream from Amelia, who I could now see was pressed up against the cliff, doing everything she could to remain small and inconspicuous behind the dragon, which had appeared to have forgotten she was there. Thank gods for that. Dragons like this were irrational. If he saw her, he might think she was trying to sneak up on him and try to kill her. What happened? Talion, whip in hand, glared at me. What are you doing here? Aren't you supposed to be guiding the prince, or did you kill him? I gestured at him over my shoulder, disinterested in whatever the prince was doing at the moment. Zeller had all my attention. Not yet. I won't get the chance either. He wants to talk to Dad about switching guy. His eyebrows perked up at that. He peered behind him at Prince Camden. He looks pissed. Joby picked him up. Didn't have time to teach him how to ride bareback. What happened here? Falling into Tamer mode, a cool mask fell over his face. He pointed at Amelia with his whip hand. Amelia was doing an annual checkup on Zoe here. I don't know what set him off, but he looks pissed. I watched the dragon spread his wings high and wide threateningly. It was a warning to keep away. His hiss backed it up, but there was a wobble to the noise. The look in his eyes weren't hostile. They were pain. The cry I'd heard earlier was definitely one of agony. Something had hurt him, though. There were no visible injuries. What hurt you, big guy? Only Amelia knew the answer, but she was trapped behind the dragon, scared out of her mind. Hey, at least she didn't have to calm him down. That was my job. A very terrifying yet thrilling job. I stepped for him. Talon gripped my arm and nodded back to the prince. Make sure nothing happens to him. I got that. Now wasn't the time to argue. Zealer would sense our rising anger and frustration and would react poorly to raised voices, so I fell into step beside the prince, ignoring him completely. Talon approached Zeller with caution in the low crowd. Zeller watched him closely, hissing and fluttering his wings as a warning to back off. His tail whipped back and forth behind him, hitting the cliffside. Small rocks broke away. Amelia screamed and covered her head as they tumbled around her. Talon moved to the side, away from the cliff, in an attempt to draw Zeller towards him. The dragon only took a few steps to get a better angle on him, the real threat, out of the crowd gathering around to watch a tamer. at work. Dad appeared at my side, my brother's close behind situation. I filled them in with what I knew, which felt so little. All I did was confirm that Zealer was hurt and irrational, which meant we might have to take drastic measures. Ones I didn't want to take, I'd saved Zeller's life before. I could do it again. Dad dispatched my brothers to clear the crowd of distraction Talon nor Zeller needed right now for me to remain at Prince Camden's side. He bit his lip watching Talon work in strict concentration. Talon swung his whip around casually, so Zeller got used to the idea of the whip moving as to not fear it. Unsettled by the movement and the direct eye contact Talon gave him, the dragon growled, swishing his tail like a rattlesnake. If Talon wasn't careful, Zeller might lash out. Quick as a cobra, Talon flicked his whip and caught Zeller around the leg. He pulled, bringing the dragon down into a submissive position. It was a mistake. The dragon roared and reared up. He tore the whip out of Talon's grasp and swung his tail all the way around, hitting my brother squarely in the chest. He went flying into the fence and hit the ground still. Talon Dad cried. Harry and Giles went to grab him, but I caught Harry while Dad got Giles. Clear your minds, boys, Dad cautioned. Collide distract Zilla. Casper caught and grab your brother while he's focused on her. Harry, Giles, get Amelia out of here. Prince Camden laughed, making me almost trip. That's suicide. She's gonna get clobbered. Then I guess you won't have to worry about me being your guide, will you? I snapped, then approached the dragon with my hands up so he could see I was unarmed. His scales bristled at my approach, claws digging deep into the earth. He bared his teeth at me. I stopped, angling him away from Talon so Casper and Cotton could move in. Hey, buddy, what's the matter? I asked the dragon softly. What happened to you? I can't help you if you don't show me, he roared, spreading his mouth wide open. His hot breath spilled over me and blew my hair back. As much as I wanted to cringe from the noise and gag at the stench of smoke and rotten meat, I held my ground, keeping my hands open, passive. Showing any kind of weakness would give him doubt, and I'd end up like Talon. He had to trust me that I knew what I was doing, and I wouldn't hurt him. Okay, sorry. Can I come a little closer? He wasn't far enough away from the wall for my brothers to get Amelia out safely. I needed him to follow me out in the open. I advanced for him, reaching my hands out for his face. He roared again, stepping for me, so he was right in my face. My body told me to run, but I shut my eyes and took a deep breath. If I showed or even smelled fear, he wouldn't give me the time of day, let alone obey me. Collapse. Tail, I turned to Dad's call, catching Zeller's tail, swinging my way. Swearing, I leapt over it, rolling to the side. Someone get her out of that. Prince Camden ordered. She's going to get herself killed. Shut up and let her work. Dad shouted. Kyle's got this. Hearing the confidence in Dad's tone snapped me back in focus. Zeller's tail was coming my way again. I only had time to brace myself before it hit my chest and sent me into the cliff face. Amelia screamed and stepped for me. I shot my hand out at her. I croaked, regaining my breath. Any movement he would see as a threat and attack them. She pressed herself against the wall instead. Content, she wasn't going to move. I shook my head to clear my mind and stood up. Salah. I barked if being passive wasn't going to work. It was time to switch gears. That wasn't cool. Man, you see what you did to me. I raised my arm so he could see the blood trickling down the nasty gash I'd gotten from the impact. His nostrils flared at the scent of blood, eyes constricting into thin, vertical lines. A rumble started in his throat as he recognized that he'd hurt me, his friend. You've got to calm down, buddy. You're going to hurt a lot of people. He bellowed, backing me up to the wall. I was faintly aware my brothers were calling for me, but I was too focused on the nose a foot away from me to hear what they said. Swallowing back a lump of bravery, I reached out and placed a hand between his nostrils. Smoke puffed out them, encasing me in a thick layer I couldn't see through. Once it cleared, he opened his mouth. My heart lurched. This was it. I'd gone too far. He was going to snap me in half with his powerful jaws. I squeezed my eyes shut
waited. He grunted, mouth still open, boiling hot breath burning my skin slightly.
Biting my lip, I opened my eyes and stared right down his throat. Gods, it stung.
His uvula jiggled as he breathed. Saliva dripped off his teeth, narrowly missing my feet. I swallowed. I'd been closer to dragons than anyone, but never practically inside one's mouth.
Even though he clearly didn't mean to harm me at this moment. Anyway, still put an awful knot in my stomach.
Once my fear faded away, I scanned his mouth to see what he was trying to show me there.
A sheep's leg was wedged between two teeth.
It must have been the sheep Amelia fed him to see if he was eating properly and not swallowing something that big wholesome dragons did and ended up choking and dying because of it.
Hey, Zeller, I see it. Will you let me remove it?
He stretched his neck out, giving me full access. Gingerly, I moved to the side of his head and reached in, praying he wouldn't shut his mouth.
My fingers barely touched the bone when he roared, a second's warning before he clamped his mouth shut. His head reared up, catching my gut and hucking me over his head. I latched onto one of the horns just above his eyebrow and clung to any part of his neck with my leg.
I held on for dear life as he swung and bucked. Dad called out to me. I chanced to look to see Casper and Harry hold him back.
Good. Now was definitely not the time for anyone to be going near this dragon.
Zeller's head flew back.
My hand slipped from his horn.
I went tumbling down his back, barely able to catch the crook of his wing joint.
Casper jaw scrap, Amelia. Now I screamed as I held on with everything I had. Thankfully, I was more familiar with this end of a dragon and found much more solid holds to grip.
Harry wrote, Zeller flapped his wings as an attempt to buck me off, since his neck wasn't long enough for his jaws to catch me.
While he wailed, Casper and Giles snuck around the back and finally got Amelia away from the wall.
Harry, the most lion of my brothers, darted up to Zeller's side.
Before he could toss the rope to me, Zeller whipped his tail around.
Harry dodged it, rolling underneath the rearing dragon to get to his other side. He threw the rope up at me. I barely managed to catch it, nearly falling off in the process.
With a grunt, I swung the thick, heavy rope around Zeller's neck and tied a loop for a more reliable handle. Zeller beat his wings again, but this time with more vigor with the intention to fly shit.
He's gonna take off. Dad warned me. Get off him. Kalai. He's not worth your life. Ignoring him, I held onto the rope, determined. If I let Zeller go, they would hunt him down tomorrow and kill him. He would be deemed too dangerous and untamable. Not happening. This dragon had done so well with our Tamer. He would be fine once we got that bone out of his teeth. And you have to prove Prince Camden wrong.
You're not a worthless dragon, Tamer.
You are the best.
Taking a deep breath to calm my mind, I went into action. First step, immobilize him.
Releasing the handle I'd made, I dove for the base of his right wing and pulled out my hunting knife in its teeth. Flipping the knife around so I held the scabbard and I rammed the hilt just beneath the joint.
Zeller cried out, his wing flopped to the ground, paralyzed. While he was surprised by his sudden paralysis, I jumped to his other wing, which was flailing about wildly, almost buffing my head. He was moving around so wildly, I had to lie on his back, wrapping my legs around the base of his wing.
He jumps, attempting to fly with one wing. We hit the ground hard. I lost my knife.
Swearing, I formed a triangle with my arm and rammed my elbow under the joint.
Just like the other wing, this one flopped to his side. He bucked desperately.
Using whatever strength I could muster, I swung off his wing and slammed my knee into a pressure point behind his front left leg, rendering it useless. As a precaution, I rolled over to his other side and elbowed the pressure point behind his front right leg. The great dragon teetered forward, roaring and shaking his head, step to secure him. To tie him down, I ordered my brothers, leaping for the dragon's head, to weigh it down while they wove his muzzle shut and tied his wings to his back.
With rope and the large iron pegs we used in cases such as these, they pinned his tail down to the ground. They moved onto his neck, binding it down the same way. I was confident Zeller wasn't going anywhere and that he was safe. I slipped off his muzzle and staggered back. My legs were a lot more wobbly than I'd anticipated, weak from clinging for my life.
Dad,
wrapped a supportive arm around me with a proud smile as he watched the whimpering dragon, while my brothers finished up securing him.
Good job, Collie. Quick thinking. Are you okay? Now that the adrenaline was wearing off, I was starting to feel the ache in my back and chest and an awful throbbing in my elbow where it had direct contact with dragon scale. One of the hardest substances man could find. I bit my lip.
I'll be fine. Nothing Amelia can't fix, right?
I turned to find the girl huddled against Prince Camden, crying.
He was the only available soul to console her at the moment, but it still got my blood boiling watching him hold him.
For some reason, that pissed me off more than anything else had today.
Not that she obviously needed comforting by someone. Not that he was just being nice.
No, it was the fact that he was holding her, being nice to her.
Letting her cry on his shoulder while he clearly didn't want to be left in charge of a weeping woman.
Say encouraging things to stop her from breaking down. There was the man I knew was hidden under all his narcissity, but he wouldn't be that man with me. Chapter 10, shoving aside my silly, envious feelings, I turned my attention to Talon. He was coming to leaning back on a fence post. I knelt beside him and lifted the dark hair out of his face to check his wounds. He slapped my hand away with a vicious glare. Get away from me, Kyle. I don't want your help. You're injured, Talon. Just let me. He shoved me hard. I fell on my rock. I said, go away. What part don't you understand about that? His blue eyes were orbs of a raging storm, hazardous to anything they laid their eyes on. I gaped, hurt. Such raw emotion was angled towards me. Talon, what did I do? What didn't you do?
Everything always has to be about you. First, you take the rite of passage away from me. Now you're stealing my dragons. I had him. I didn't need your help.
It took 5 of us to bring him down. I snapped, standing up. You did not have him.
I helped because you're too stubborn to admit when you need it.
I hate you. He jumped to his feet and pushed me again. I wish you were never born.
At least Mom would still be around.
He rammed his shoulder into mine as he passed me for the pen's exit.
I was going to run after him, but Dad caught my arm, the one with the sore elbow.
I tried to hide my wince from him. He saw it and eased his grip with an apology in his eyes.
Let him go. Call. He needs to cool off. He's hurt. And so, are you going to look after yourself?
We'll handle everything from here.
I looked over to Zealer, who was seething but had stopped trying to escape his bond.
You're not going to put him down, are you? He only acted out because he has a bone stuck in his teeth. He wouldn't. He put a hand on my shoulder and squeezed tenderly. I'll let him live and have a healer look at his mouth. Get checked out, Kalai, please. It wasn't until I felt the dribble down the back of my neck when I realized I'd also suffered a head wound and that he was staring at the copious amount of blood trickling down my face.
Okay, I went over to Zealer and pressed my palm between his nostril.
Be good for them. Big guy. They're going to look after you. The pain will stop. I promise.
His watery eyes met mine a moment, then he nodded the best he could, with his face pinned to the ground.
I kissed his scaly face. Good boy.
I'll stop by the healing pen tomorrow with Jerky if I hear you behave yourself.
The dragon perked up at that and stopped puffing black smoke. Satisfied he was going to be all right. While I was gone, I hobbled over to Amelia and the prince.
Hey, Amelia, I know you're probably scared, but do you think you could?
She leapt from the prince and wrapped her arms around me with more force than I expected from someone so small. Thank you. You saved my life.
I couldn't stop the flush rising on my cheeks. No one had ever thanked me for taming a dragon for the...
I tucked some hair from my ears so she or the gobsack prince couldn't see the blood. I was just doing my job. You don't have to thank me for that. She slapped my bad arm. I went. Of course I do. You were amazing. I've never seen someone tame like that. Pressure point.
Brilliant. No harm comes to the dragon. It makes my job so much easier.
Oh, your arm's wounded. And I just hit it. I'm so thoughtless. Come on, I'll make you brand new so you can continue training the prince. I shrugged, avoiding his eye contact. No rush. She doesn't want me guiding him. I'm a worthless dragon fucker. She glared at the sheepish prince, slipping her arm behind my back to lead me to the healing hut. Actually, the prince said, stepping in front of us. Can we talk? Changed his mind. Did he? Too bad for him. I'd seen his true color. I didn't want anything to do with him. Much like all our dragons. He could switch guides, but it wouldn't change who he was. Sticking my chin up, I passed him. Nope. What do you mean? No? He demanded, following us through the streets. Damn it. I was hoping he wouldn't clue in that I was too hurt to fend him off. We're talking, he decided. Sighing, I let Amelia open the door to the hut for me and trailed in behind her. The prince was hot on my tail. I guess we are. I sat down on the bench while Amelia lit the candle. The sun hadn't quite set yet, but it would be soon, definitely, by the time she's finished with me. The prince stood in front of me, arms crossed and adamant. I listened to him. Suddenly, the confidence and swagger deflated, and he sighed heavily, averting his gaze to the floor. So I think I might have been hasty to judge you and your methods. I'm sorry, and I pray. If he thought I was going to make this easy for him after he ridiculed my work and insulted me, he was sorely mistaken. He chewed on his lip, a light glare in his eyes when he lifted them to me. Amelia came to my side. Off with the shirt. Let's see what that dragon's done to you. She gave the prince a pointed look to turn his gentlemanly gaze away. He didn't. Not caring if he was looking or not, I pried my shirt off, revealing the dark bruise across my chest and undoubtedly my back where Zeller's tail had caught me and thrown me into the wall. Amelia hissed, taking in the full extent of my injuries. How do you do it? I'd be crying my eyes out by now. It's not as bad as it looked. Or maybe I'd gotten used to being bruised and beaten. Taming dragons wasn't a walk in the park. Untamed dragons were vicious. They had killed many tamers in my village. It was a risk we all took whenever we approached a dragon. She shook her head reproachfully at me. You're crazy. So I've been told. I straightened up so she could get better access to my injuries and looked at the prince who was slowly taking in the bruises, cuts, and scars splattering my torso with concern, surprise, and possibly respect. A new look for him. Go on, you were saying he frowned at me, pursing his lips in disdain. Well, he could suck up a little pride if he wanted my help. I'm sorry for the way I treated you, he went on reluctantly. He sounded like a stroppy child that had been forced to apologize. I shouldn't have assumed you couldn't do your job because you were a woman and talk to dragons even though they can't talk back to you. Clearly, it gives you an advantage over your brothers. And he was getting warmer to what I was fishing for. His dark green eyes narrowed into a sharp glare. The orange tinge of the candles lit his hair up with golds and bronzes. It added more tone to his skin, too. I imagined that's how he'd look in the summer, training in the sun all day with his brothers. I'm sorry for letting you ever get to me. She has you all wrong, and I press. I hadn't expected him to bring up Amber, but that had been nice. He groaned and shifted his weight with an eye roll. Alaric was right. I am an idiot around beautiful women. You make me the stupidest man alive. Okay, he was wandering away from what I'd been looking for. But damn it, my cheeks flamed. Even when he saw all the scars and my bruises, he still thought I was beautiful. The most beautiful woman he'd met, according to him. Amelia snickered while she lathered my back in the magical poultice. It felt cool and soothing against my sweaty back. I closed my eyes and released a long, relaxed breath. As shitty as being thrown around by a dragon was the healing process afterwards. Wasn't so bad. The poultice was refreshing on my skin. I got to rest for a day or two, and my brothers always were around to get something, anything for me. What's so funny? Prince Camden demanded of the healer. I'm trying to have a private conversation. She wants you to ask her to be your guide again.
Prince.
You really don't think clearly around beautiful women, do you? Of course not. He agreed instantly, which surprised me. It's insanely distracting. He sighed and looked at me. You really know how to grind my gears, don't you? Making me act like a fool. I hope you're enjoying yourself because it doesn't happen often. He put his hands on his hips, looking at me levelly with those fiery green eyes of his. So will you be my guide, ignoring the pain in my back? I shrugged. That depends entirely if you're going to be an asshole and call me a dragon fucker again. The determination in his eyes faded to one of sorrow. It softened his features, conveying how truly sorry he was for saying that. But I wanted him to say it. He swallowed. I will never compare you to anything derogatory again, Kali. I'm sorry. I took out my frustration on not being chosen by Dragon instantly on you.
You were doing your job, and I refused to listen.
I don't deserve a dragon after the way I treated you. I stuck my chin up. No, probably not, but I will help you find one. You'll be the strongest partnership in your family if you listen to me. He cocked an eyebrow of curiosity at me. You think so? We'll find out. Tomorrow, I'll teach you how to fly. Then, depending how quickly you pick it up, we'll find the rest of the colony throughout the valley. And if you question my methods, I'll be more than happy to leave you on a mountain dragon lab. A smile flitted across his face. It made butterflies attack my stomach. It was such a pleasant look for him.
I was so entranced by his pretty face. I didn't notice Amelia coming around my side and slapping some salve on my elbow.
Yowling, I scooted down the length of the bench from her. Hey! For a healer, your bedside manner is terrible. She shook her head at me. I thought you could take it. I'll take it if I have to, but a little warning would be appreciated. Sorry, she murmured, going back to her menstruation. Prince Camden sat on the other side of the table, watching Amelia intently as she worked her magic on me. Or what was he, studying my scars? I looked the other way, trying not to figure out what he thought of them. It didn't matter what he or anyone else thought and changed them. They were a part of who I was, and while I sometimes doubted my life choices when Amber or a certain boorish prince mocked me for it, I was proud of who I was. Let's see, another woman do what I could do, or man for that matter. No one could hold me back, and I will continue to prove people wrong. My methods would save human and dragon lives alike. Prince Camden was going to be my first student.
The guinea pig.
If a prince took me seriously, others would too. I could teach future tamers. They didn't have to use whips or other weapons to control a dragon. Amelia finished up the wrappings and helped put my shirt back on. If you're flying tomorrow, take it easy. You'll still be sore. Zealer hit you pretty hard. Duly noted, I never took it easy. That was for pussy. She frowned at me, recognizing my tone. I usually reserved it for whatever Amber had to say about my body while she healed it, since she was the one who generally healed me with her stronger magic. Are you going to be okay? Heading home? You can stay here for the night if you want. I waved it off, but it was Prince Camden who stood up and inclined his head to her. I'll make sure she arrives home in one piece. In that case, you might need to carry her up the stairs, she added cheekily. Her legs might be weak. My legs are fine, I grumbled, standing and feeling a tweak in my knee. Damn it, swallowing back a whimper, I stood straighter and did my best not to limp for the door. The prince was at my side in an instant, slipping his arm around my waist to support me. I'm fine, I insisted, putting a hand on his very firm chest to push away. He held me tighter against him, flashing a daring grin that suited him far too well for my own good. If you keep fighting me, I'll have to carry you back. I've got to make sure my teacher is all fixed up by tomorrow. I'd like to see you try. I muttered, but stopped protesting and let the warmth of his body soak through my clothes, adding to the blush on my cheek. Fine, you can help me limp through the village, but I'm walking through the door by myself. I don't want my family to worry. I'll allow it. He'll allow it. Well, how generous. Amelia opened the door for us and followed us down the street, then bade her good night. Once we passed her house. You know, he said, once we were alone, it's okay to need help every now and again. If I've observed one thing from your family, it's that you guys think you have to do everything by yourself. I asked for help with Zeller, didn't I? What did he know about my family? He'd only been around for 2 days. Yeah, Only when you're Tammy. You seem to think your brothers will think less of you if you appear weak, because they will. If they don't think I can handle taming, they'll make me do something else. I don't expect you to understand. You were born to become a dragon prince. You were raised to protect your people. No one wants anything different from you. I chose to be a tamer, but I can do other things. If I can't handle the tamer's life, and so many people would prefer that. Half the village is waiting for me to crumble under the pressure and admit I can't do it. They're wrong, but I can't give them anything to latch onto. They only need one excuse, one slip up from me to pounce and take everything I'd worked for away. He looked up at the dark, cloudy sky. The moon barely shone through the clouds. The only thing that lit our path was the occasional torchlight to ward off harpies. Luckily, I knew this village well enough to navigate our way back in the dark. I might be destined to be a dragon prince, he said, his tone surprisingly low, soft. But I was born a prince of Walla. Since I could talk, people have tried to manipulate me to fit into their plan. Trust me, I know what it's like to have a horde of people waiting for me to screw up. If I've learned anything from the court life, it's important to find allies wherever you can, because when you fall, it's a lot easier to get back up when someone helps you. I'm lucky to have my brothers and Ronan, a close friend of mine. Actually, I think Ronan would like you. You'd remind him of a crazy ex. If it weren't for the endearing nature of his tone when he talked about his friend, I would have been insulted. You wish he was here, don't you? Fuck yeah. First of all, he'd have stopped me from being a dick to you. Secondly, he'd tell me I had nothing to worry about, that I'll be bound you will. Prince, it's only been a day. Prince Ally broke a family record by becoming bound in 2 weeks. He blinked in surprise at me. He did. But my brothers said they all found their dragons instantly. Your brothers are lion shits? Of course they're gonna say that. You all have to one-up each other. I knew from experience if we were reversed, my brothers would do the exact same thing. He relaxed in time for us to come to a stop in front of my house. Just as he promised, he released me so I could walk through the front door alone. Everyone but Talon was home, despite the awful things he'd said to me. I couldn't help worrying about him. It wasn't safe for him to be away from the village at night, even with a dragon. Dad didn't seem worried when he greeted us, though. He did frown when he noticed my slight limp. Do you need a hand going up the stairs? I think I can manage. I snided. My talk with the prince had been enlightening, but that didn't mean I was ready to accept help. Still, Casper walked up the steps behind me, ready to catch me if I faltered.
I rolled my eyes to hide how touched I was that he and the prince, who had also come, wanted to make sure I made it to my room alive.
Good night, Casper Prince. Smiling weakly, Casper kissed the top of my head, then went down the stairs to the card game he and my other brothers were having. Prince Camden inclined his head to me in a gentlemanly-like fashion.
You can call me Camden, or Cam. By the way, I don't like being so formal around here.
I want you to feel comfortable with me. Doing and saying what you'd normally do, though, I think you've been yourself with me the entire time, so thank you. People aren't themselves with me often. He flushed, seemingly surprised by his blathering. After a moment of staring at me, waiting for me to say something snappy, he cleared his throat awkwardly. Good night, Kalai. He hurried down the stairs to join my brothers' game. I stared after him, wondering how long I was going to be smiling like an idiot. The last thing I needed was for him to think I liked him. That would be ridiculous. The video is about to end, but the adventure has just begun. Don't go away, subscribe to our channel, and next time we'll fly even higher.